is a puppy mill.
The problem is very, very widespread in North Carolina.
Starvation and disease, flea and tick infestation, fur matted with feces and urine, rotting teeth, fused eyes, and embedded collars.
These dogs are suffering, tremendously suffering.
Some blame bad breeders trying to meet the demand for designer dogs and cutting corners to boost their bottom line.
And to me, that is fundamentally wrong, especially when we live in a civilized society.
A proposed new law would regulate commercial dog breeders in our state.
And this would just give us an opportunity to prohibit this kind of neglect.
The NRA and agribusiness groups are fighting the bill, even though it excludes hunters and farmers.
We see this bill as being not about animal cruelty, but rather it's about limiting and restricting the ability to breed animals.
The American Kennel Club sees it that way too, and along with other opponents, points to one of the bill's biggest supporters, the Humane Society of the United States.
They do have a campaign to eradicate commercial breeding facilities. And we part company with them there.
Will partisan politics kill the puppy mill bill?
I think it's galvanized a lot of dog breeders to realize that they're under attack.
Some say the term puppy mill is inflammatory, emotional, and even vague. But it's a term used by veterinarians, law enforcement officers, and state prosecutors. They define it as an operation that breeds puppies to sell to the general public that ignores basic humane standards of care for the puppies it sells. Our focal point, the problem of puppy mills in our state, and how an effort to protect puppies turned political. And if you're still confused about what one is, you're about to see an example. A warning though, some of the images you're about to see are disturbing. This is undercover video of Thornton's Kennels, a dog breeding operation in Wayne County.
People would buy puppies from there, they would become sick, they would die. They would report it to the animal control officers.
Animal control responded, found problems, and tried to work with the kennel's owner, Virginia Thornton, to correct them.
5 times he responded, 5 times he gave recommendations, told there were, major problems here. He saw sick dogs, he saw dirty cages. And during that period from December '07 until February '09, there were more citizen complaints.
When the situation did not improve, animal control took undercover video and photos and showed them to veterinarian and animal cruelty investigator Kelly Ferris.
My first reaction was that, yes, this is a puppy mill. These animals need immediate assistance, and we should try to move forward as quickly as possible.
It's been a long time coming.
The county had to file a civil complaint so it could seize the dogs and gather the evidence needed to file criminal charges. Assistant District Attorney Terry Ye did just that after looking at these photos.
It made me sick. That's when I agreed to take the case. I didn't need any more convincing than that.
Overgrown nails, urine burns on the paw.
Most of Thornton's 283 dogs were underweight, and many were in terrible condition. Fur matted with urine and feces, paws scalded from standing in urine, eyes fused shut by infection, rotten teeth and jaw bones, embedded collars, ringworm, and skin infections.
It was just heartbreaking and devastating, and makes me sick to think about it right now, actually.
One barn stored dogs no longer able to breed.
They were put over there to die. They'd lived there for 5, 8, 10 years to die. Never saw a vet. Never, it's my belief their feet never touched the ground for years.
Ye charged Thornton with 12 counts of animal cruelty based on the sampling of 12 dogs.
If you love animals, this case will make you cry.
And Ye believes the Thornton case is just the tip of an iceberg.
And I think it's proven by the fact that you see them all the time on the news, not just in our district, but all across the country.
Look at the matting on this dog.
People who buy puppies from those facilities often end up with sick animals.
They're cute. I think that's the bottom line. People see these cute little dogs and they don't know where they come from.
Shelter operators say more people buying from puppy mills means fewer puppies getting adopted.
We already have too many animals in our community that do not have homes.
North Carolina animal shelters euthanize about 250,000 dogs and cats every year.
And so it's hard to make sense of whenever you're killing that many animals to then also be breeding that many, if not more.
Puppy mill raids can also be a burden on local shelters.
We have to be able to ramp up our operation and be able to handle a lot of animals coming in, and usually ones with a lot of special needs or in need of medical care.
Some blame the puppy mill problem on a lack of regulation in our state.
Right now, there is no state regulation under the Animal Welfare Act of commercial breeders.
Next, the Thornton's Kennels case sparks a controversial effort to change that.
Let's shut down puppy mills in North Carolina.
You're watching Focal Point from WRAL News. In-depth coverage you can count on.
The Thornton's Kennels case became the inspiration for new legislation to regulate commercial dog breeders in our state. Supporters say it would help eliminate puppy mills, but there is strong opposition from some surprising sources, and what seemed like a simple proposal to some has ignited a controversial debate. When he saw a news report on the puppy mill raid in his district, Senator Don Davis says he wanted to see the Thornton's puppies for himself.
My first response was, wow, I just cannot believe what is before my eyes right here. I can't believe this. And to look at some of these animals, it was just an awful sight.
So Davis introduced a bill in the Senate that would regulate commercial dog breeders who sell directly to the public. Commercial breeders would be defined as people who have at least 15 intact female dogs and at least 30 puppies to sell. They would have to pay $50 for a license and maintain standards of care for their animals that would be established by the State Department of Agriculture. The standards would be enforced by county animal control officers. Agriculture officials already enforce similar standards for pet stores, public and private animal shelters, and boarding kennels.
It's just adding commercial dog breeders to that. That basically is all it's doing.
The standards include adequate space, food, water, exercise, and veterinary care. Facilities get annual inspections.
We go through to make sure that they meet those standards. If they don't, we point out where the problems are and try to bring them into compliance.
Hi, kids.
Hi, babies.
But commercial breeders are battling legislation that would require them to comply with those same basic standards.
There you go.
Dog breeders Larry and Dee Dee Sorensen say they're not opposed to laws that prevent abuse.
We just want ones that are responsible, enforceable, and that they don't harm the people that they're not trying to harm.
Does anybody want to be a show dog?
Fun size?
The Sorensens aren't opposed to regulating commercial breeders. They just think the law now on the table is vague, arbitrary, and unnecessary. The Sorensens recite the same concerns expressed by the organization that registers their dogs, the American Kennel Club.
The American Kennel Club is part of the solution here, not part of the problem in this.
But the AKC finds itself in a bit of a paradox. It's an organization dedicated to dogs, fighting a bill designed to protect them.
These are the people that find your dogs when they go missing?
When we visited its operations center in Raleigh, General Counsel Margaret Poindexter went out of her way to show us just how dog-friendly the AKC is. She toured us around the cubicles of AKC employees who had brought their dogs to work.
I saw you come in, so I knew you were here.
There are already state and federal standards for kennels, pet stores, animal shelters. Why not have state standards for commercial breeders?
Well, fundamentally, we don't have a problem with standards for commercial breeders.
Poindexter says the AKC's problem is the way the proposed bill defines a commercial dog breeder by the number of dogs they have.
When you pick arbitrary numbers, numbers do not predict cruelty or non-cruelty.
But the AKC's own inspection program over its own breeders is based on a number.
Our protocol is based on, again, how many litters somebody registers with us, and the more litters someone registers, the more frequently then they would be inspected.
The logic being that the more dogs, the greater the chances of neglect or abuse. The Sorensens say they haven't been inspected by the AKC in more than 10 years because they produce so few litters. Virginia Thornton was raising AKC registered dogs too, but the AKC won't say when it last inspected her kennel because of its own ongoing investigation into her operation.
What's important to keep in mind, though, is an inspection on the day, and it reflects the conditions that the inspector finds there, much like a restaurant inspection. You go in, and on that day, this is what we observed.
But veterinarians say things like malnutrition, embedded collars, disease, and genetic problems don't happen overnight. They take months, even years to develop.
Those are the kinds of things that we're looking for medically to show that these animals have been suffering pain for long periods of time.
Come on. Size Hershey bar.
The AKC is also concerned that under the new law, authorities could seize the dogs of breeders violating its standards.
And those dogs could be sold or euthanized, rather than giving the breeder an opportunity to come into compliance.
But in the Thornton case and other cases across the state, breeders are usually given an opportunity to make improvements, and dogs are only seized as a last resort. Supporters say the same would be true under the new law.
The goal of this legislation is not to shut down operations. It's just to make sure that the animals are cared for.
So what would good dog breeders have to fear from the new law?
Nothing. You have nothing to fear. If you're taking care of your animals, there's no problem.
Critics of the proposed bill say existing animal cruelty laws are enough to prevent abuse and point to the Thornton case as proof.
We believe that our efforts should be dedicated towards committing the resources to enforce those laws.
But state animal cruelty laws set no standards for how breeders must care for their dogs, and investigators say animals must be in very bad shape before a case of animal cruelty can be successfully prosecuted under existing laws.
It would be far better to make sure that we have standards in place so that it doesn't get to that point.
But there's an underlying reason the AKC opposes a bill to regulate commercial dog breeders in our state. It's because the Humane Society of the United States supports it.
They do have a campaign to eradicate commercial breeding facilities, and we part company with them there.
Next, how the Humane Society of the United States' support of the proposed legislation has generated a groundswell of opposition.
They want to get their people in to begin to monitor, harass, and ultimately drive out of selective breeding people in North Carolina who want to selectively breed dogs.
You're watching Focal Point from WRAL News. In-depth coverage you can count on.
You might expect people involved in commercial dog breeding to fight new regulations, but the list of opponents goes far beyond breeders and reveals just how controversial and political the puppy mill bill has become. One of the most vocal opponents of the legislation is the North Carolina Sporting Dog Association.
Senate Bill 460 is deeply intrusive to the breeders of North Carolina.
The National Rifle Association opposes the bill too. On its website, the NRA calls it an anti-hunting bill. We couldn't get the NRA to do an interview to explain that.
I'm a member of the NRA. I mean, I don't understand their opposition. I mean, this has nothing to do with hunting, has nothing to do with guns. I really don't get it.
Especially since the bill doesn't include people who raise dogs for hunting.
Hunters, show, working, herding, all those are exempted from the bill.
But supporters of the legislation say that isn't the message some opponents are delivering.
They still went around telling hunters that they weren't exempt, that they had something to worry about, that they needed to oppose it, and so it was a tough thing to reason with.
Organizations tied to animal agriculture in North Carolina oppose the bill too, even though it doesn't mention farm animals. Those groups referred us to the Animal Agricultural Alliance for comment. It's based in the Washington, D.C. area and says its mission is consumer education.
And to really monitor the activity of activist groups that were growing here in the U.S. That were opposed to raising animals for food and fiber.
One of the activist groups the Alliance is monitoring is the Humane Society of the United States because of its support of our state's puppy mill bill.
We see this bill as being not about animal cruelty, but rather it's about limiting and restricting the ability to breed animals.
That's how the bill's opponents from the AKC to the NRA see it too. While all of them cite many of the same reasons for opposing the bill, the involvement of the Humane Society of the U.S. seems to be the main one.
And they don't know that a chicken likes to be petted and held.
They point to HSUS videos like this that show farm animals as pets.
They don't know that cows like to be hugged.
It's very much intended to blur that line between farm animals and cats and dogs.
The Humane Society of the U.S. website says it supports humane farming practices, but there's no call for an outright ban on animal breeding. There are even tips on its website on how to buy puppies from responsible breeders. But the Animal Agriculture Alliance and other opponents say the HSUS sees the puppy mill bill as a small step towards its much larger agenda.
We see this as precedent setting for then potentially restricting breeding of commercial farm animals.
Not true, says the HSUS.
I had to try to address the slippery slope argument, or that I did not have some secret hidden agenda to turn the state vegan.
Arrington says the bill is what it is, a bill to help stop inhumane practices at puppy mills. But the North Carolina Sporting Dog Association says the HSUS has manufactured a crisis to push its bigger agenda.
They claim in North Carolina that we have a crisis of puppy mills. That's a lie. We do not. We're not a puppy mill state.
McLeese says the Humane Society of the U.S. pushed the Thornton's Kennels raid because it was in the district of a freshman legislator it thought it could influence, in this case, Senator Davis. She claims there was a conspiracy to delay the raid a year until the start of the legislative session, and she points to footage of HSUS volunteers helping with the seizure as evidence.
That's ridiculous. That's not the case.
Ye says animal control spent months trying to help Virginia Thornton fix the problems at her kennel before finally seizing her dogs to build a criminal case. The Humane Society of the U.S. often assists in puppy mill raids because it has volunteer manpower and expertise local authorities lack. And Senator Davis denies being a pawn in any HSUS conspiracy.
I was not motivated by the Humane Society. The Humane Society has not drafted this legislation. I drafted this legislation.
Davis says he was motivated by seeing Thornton's dogs. And as for the legislation addressing a phony crisis,
The problem is very, very widespread in North Carolina.
Next, how you can help eliminate puppy mills by not buying a puppy like this. And what kind of price are we talking about again?
You're watching Focal Point from WRAL News. In-depth coverage you can count on. To learn more about the issues covered in this episode of Focal Point, visit WRAL.com, click on News, and then Documentaries.
In the debate over regulating commercial dog breeders in our state, there is common ground. No one wants to see the kind of puppy abuse uncovered at Thornton's Kennels. And everyone agrees that people who buy puppies can be part of the solution. Pop culture helps drive the demand for puppies.
I think you have people like Paris Hilton or Britney Spears that carry their cute little dogs around to movie premieres, and you see it in the magazines, you see it on TV, and people want to be like them, and so they latch on to those dogs.
Breeders try to meet the demand. There are hundreds of online ads for puppies in North Carolina alone. It's hard to tell good breeders from bad.
If they want to meet you in a parking lot or the city park or something like that, that's a red
Rest
flag.
area.
That's a red flag.
We found an online ad that offered to do just that. It had little information about the puppies, no pictures, no health guarantee, no registration, just an offer to meet somewhere to see the puppies. We accepted and met the breeder in a parking lot. How you doing? Good to see you.
Yes, sir.
Most reputable breeders will invite you to see their breeding facility and the parents of the puppies they're selling. Can I come by and see your facility?
Yeah.
I could? But this breeder never followed through, and we never got to see his kennel. We don't know if he runs a puppy mill, but experts say buying puppies like this only helps keep them in business. Some say responsible buyers going to responsible breeders is the solution to the puppy mill problem.
If there's no market for those dogs, if people aren't buying dogs from those types of facilities, there's no business, and they won't continue.
Animal advocates say people should consider adopting before buying.
Nothing wrong with those dogs. We just would like people to adopt from a shelter instead of buying from a breeder.
The bill to regulate breeders narrowly passed in the Senate and first reading in the House before being referred back to committee. The House will take it up again in next year's short session.
I don't know any normal people that think abuse of puppies and their mothers is a good idea. I mean, I just think if people listen to reason, they will vote for this bill. It's simply including what is already required in pet stores and kennels, and it just makes common sense.
The woman whose kennel inspired the bill was convicted on all 12 counts of animal cruelty.
Get that damn camera out of my face.
Is there anything you'd like to say?
No, I have no comment, sir.
A judge gave Virginia Thornton 3 years probation, a $2,000 fine, and 48 hours of community service.
To me, that was a slap on the hand for what she has done with all the dogs that she has bred. Come on, Chloe.
Animal rescue groups helped find homes for most of the dogs seized from Thornton's kennels. Chloe, a long-haired Chihuahua, found a home with Gina Rushing in Morrisville.
When she came to us, she was very slim, missing hair. It was all related to malnutrition. She was very skittish. She would stay in one area. She was afraid of loud noises.
Rushing says seeing images of the abused and neglected Thornton's Kennels dogs on the news inspired her to adopt Chloe.
It's just horrible conditions that they were kept under.
The experience has also changed Rushing's approach to getting dogs.
I would definitely go to rescue organizations before I would purchase anywhere else. There's plenty of good dogs out there that need homes.
Now that Chloe has found one, Rushing says she's healthy and happy.
She'll live a great old life.